Welcome back to 30 Days to Fluent English. This is day 24, and today's topic is super important. Handling difficult conversations in English.
That's right. No matter how fluent you are, at some point, you'll face misunderstandings, disagreements, or even complaints. And let's be honest, these moments can be stressful.
Oh, absolutely. Even in our native language, these situations can be tricky. But in English, it can feel even harder.
Exactly. You might struggle to find the right words or worry about sounding too rude or too direct. Has that ever happened to you?
If so, don't worry, you're not alone. Many English learners feel this way. In fact, even native speakers sometimes struggle with handling difficult conversations smoothly.
But here's the good news. You can learn strategies to handle them confidently and politely.
That's why today we'll show you how to. Stay calm and polite when things get stressful. Clarify misunderstandings quickly and smoothly. Disagree without offending the other person. And make complaints in a polite and effective way.
Oh, and we'll also talk about cultural differences, because how you handle a tough conversation in the US, the UK, or Asia can be very different.
Trust me, knowing these skills will boost your confidence in real-life conversations, whether it's at work, with friends, or while traveling.
So if you've ever felt stuck in a tough conversation, don't worry, we've got you covered.
All right, let's dive in and learn how to handle difficult conversations like a pro. All right, let's start with the first step to handling difficult conversations, staying calm and polite. This is so important because when things get stressful, it's easy to react emotionally.
Exactly. And in English-speaking cultures, people tend to respect those who stay calm and professional, even in tough situations.
But let's be honest, when we feel frustrated, it's hard to stay polite. Have you ever had a moment where you wanted to say something like, "That's wrong," or "This makes no sense"?
Oh, I definitely have. But instead of reacting impulsively, you can use some polite phrases to keep the conversation smooth. For example, instead of "That's wrong," try, "I see your point, but I think there's another way to look at it." "I understand, but I have a different opinion." Instead of "That's not fair," try, "I see what you're saying, but I'd like to explain my side of things. I completely understand, but here's my perspective."
See how these phrases soften the tone? They help you express your opinion without sounding aggressive.
Right. And another key tip, if you feel frustrated or nervous, take a deep breath before responding.
Yes. And you can also use buffer phrases to give yourself time to think. For example, that's an interesting point. I see what you mean. Let me think about that for a second.
These small pauses can help prevent emotional reactions and make you sound more thoughtful and professional.
That's a great point. And here's another pro tip. Instead of focusing on the problem, focus on finding a solution. Try using phrases like, "Let's try to find a solution that works for both of us." "I understand there's an issue. How can we fix this together?"
Yes, people respond better when they feel like you're working with them, not against them.
So, to recap, when handling stressful situations, remember these 3 key points. Stay calm and take a deep breath before reacting. Use polite and neutral phrases to express your opinion. Focus on solutions, not just the problem.
All right, now let's move on to something that happens all the time, misunderstandings.
Oh yes, it's super common, especially when learning a new language. You say something, but the other person takes it the wrong way.
And honestly, this can happen even between native speakers. But the good news is, there are easy ways to fix a misunderstanding quickly and smoothly.
Yes. And the worst thing to do is to get defensive or frustrated. Instead, just stay calm and use one of these phrases to clear things up.
Let's say you made a comment and someone misinterpreted what you meant. Instead of saying, "That's not what I meant," which might sound defensive, try these. "Oh, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Sorry, I wasn't clear. What I meant to say was..." Let me explain that in a different way.
Exactly. These phrases help you fix the misunderstanding without making the other person feel bad.
And here's an example. Imagine you say, "That was an interesting idea," but the other person thinks you're being sarcastic.
Oh! Instead of panicking, you could say, "Oh, I wasn't being sarcastic. I really thought it was interesting. Sorry if that came across the wrong way. I meant that in a positive way."
See? A simple clarification can fix the problem immediately.
But what if you are the one who misunderstood someone else? Instead of guessing what they meant, you can use these phrases. "Just to make sure I understand correctly, are you saying that? Could you clarify what you mean by that?" So, if I understand you correctly, you mean,
Right, let's say your boss says, "We need to adjust the deadline." Do they mean the deadline is sooner or later?
good question. Instead of assuming, you could say, "When you say adjust the deadline, do you mean moving it earlier or later?"
That way, you get a clear answer and avoid confusion.
Okay, here's a tricky one. What if someone thinks you were being rude, but you actually didn't mean to be?
Oof, that's tough, but don't worry. There are ways to smooth things over. You can say, "Oh, I'm so sorry if that sounded rude. I didn't mean it that way. I didn't mean to offend you. What I was trying to say was, oh, that's not what I meant at all. Let me rephrase that."
Perfect. For example, if you say, "You look tired today," someone might take it the wrong way.
Right. Instead of making excuses, you can quickly correct it by saying, "Oh, I didn't mean that in a bad way. I just meant that you seem a little quieter than usual."
That way you can clear up the misunderstanding without making it awkward.
All right, let's summarize. If you face a misunderstanding, remember these 3 golden rules. If someone misunderstood you, clarify with polite phrases like, "Oh, I think there's been a misunderstanding." If you misunderstood someone else, check by asking, "Just to make sure I understand correctly, do you mean?" If someone thinks you were rude, fix it quickly with, "Oh, I didn't mean it that way."
That's right. And now that we know how to fix misunderstandings, let's move on to another tricky situation. How to disagree politely.
All right, now let's talk about something that can feel really uncomfortable. Disagreeing with someone.
Oh, absolutely. Disagreeing is tough because you don't want to offend the other person, but you also want to express your opinion.
Exactly. And in English, if you sound too direct, people might think you're being rude. But if you're too indirect, they might not even realize you disagree.
So the key is to find a balance. You want to be clear, but also polite. And lucky for you, we have some great phrases to help you do that.
Let's start with the most polite way to disagree, using softening phrases. Instead of saying, "You're wrong," which sounds harsh, you can try, "I see what you're saying, but I think there's another perspective. That's an interesting point, but I see it a little differently. I understand your view, but I have a slightly different opinion."
See? These phrases help you disagree respectfully without making the other person feel bad.
And here's an example. Imagine you're in a meeting and someone says, "I think we should cancel the project." Instead of saying, "That's a bad idea," you could say, "I see where you're coming from, but I think we should explore other options before making a decision."
Much better. It keeps the conversation positive and professional.
Now, what if you're talking to a friend? In casual conversations, you can make disagreements feel softer and friendlier by adding phrases like, "I get what you mean, but I have to say I disagree a little." "I see your point, but I think there's another way to look at it." "That's a good argument, but here's another perspective."
Exactly. For example, let's say your friend says, "Pineapple on pizza is the best." Instead of saying, "No way, that's disgusting," you could say, "I get why people like it, but personally, I'm not a fan."
See how that keeps things light and friendly?
Yeah. And adding personally, or in my opinion, makes it clear that it's just your perspective, not a universal truth.
Okay, what if you agree with part of what someone said, but not completely? Instead of fully disagreeing, you can use partial agreement phrases like, "I agree with some of that, but I have a slightly different take." "That's a good point, but I think there's more to consider." I see your perspective, but I'd add that.
This is really useful in debates or work discussions. For example, if someone says, social media is bad for mental health, instead of fully disagreeing, you could say, I agree that social media can be harmful, but I also think it depends on how people use it.
Yes, that way you acknowledge their point while still sharing your own opinion.
Now, what if you're in a business meeting or a professional setting? You need to sound extra polite and diplomatic. Here are some great phrases. With all due respect, I see things differently. I appreciate your input, but I'd like to offer another perspective. That's an interesting point, but my experience has been a little different.
For example, if your boss says we should cut the marketing budget by 50% and you disagree, you could say, I understand why that might seem necessary, but I'm concerned about how it will impact our brand visibility.
See? You're expressing your disagreement, but in a very professional and respectful way.
All right, let's recap. When disagreeing in English, remember these 4 strategies. Use softening phrases. I see what you mean, but make it friendly. Personally, I think, or I get your point, but partially agree before disagreeing. That's a good point, but be extra polite in professional settings. With all due respect, I see things differently.
That's right. And now that we know how to disagree politely, let's move on to our next challenge, how to make a complaint politely.
All right, now let's talk about something really practical. How to make a polite complaint in English.
Oh yes, whether you're at a restaurant, a hotel, or even at work, sometimes you need to complain about something. But if you say it too directly, you might sound rude.
Exactly. And in English-speaking cultures, how you complain is just as important as what you're complaining about.
So today, we'll teach you how to complain in a way that's polite, effective, and doesn't cause unnecessary conflict.
Let's say you're at a restaurant and your food arrives cold. You're hungry and you're not happy.
Oh no. But instead of saying, this food is cold, this is terrible, which sounds aggressive, you can try something politer like, excuse me, but I think there's a small problem with my meal. I'm really sorry to bother you, but my food is a little cold. Would it be possible to heat it up? I don't mean to be difficult, but I was expecting my dish to be hot. Could you help me with this?
Much better. These phrases sound polite and professional, which makes it more likely that the staff will help you.
And let's say they fix the problem. What should you say?
Good question. You can say, thank you so much, I really appreciate it. I appreciate your help. Thanks a lot.
Always end on a positive note. People will be more willing to help you next time.
Now, what if you check into a hotel and your room isn't clean?
Oh, that's frustrating. But instead of saying, this room is dirty, this is unacceptable. Zranya, excuse me, but I just checked into my room and I noticed it's not completely clean. Would it be possible to have housekeeping take a look? I don't mean to cause any trouble, but my room doesn't seem to have been cleaned properly. Could someone check on that for me? I'm sorry to bring this up, but I was expecting a clean room. Could you help me with this?
See how softening the language makes it more polite? Instead of sounding like a demand, it sounds like a request.
And if the hotel staff apologizes, you can say, thank you for understanding. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your help. Thanks for sorting it out.
That way, you stay polite while still getting the problem fixed.
Now let's imagine you ordered something online and it arrived damaged. What do you do?
Well, instead of saying, so this is broken, I want a refund. Zrenya, hi, I recently received my order, but unfortunately it arrived damaged. Could you help me with a replacement? I'm sorry to bother you, but I just noticed that my item is faulty. What's the best way to resolve this? I understand these things happen, but I was expecting my item in good condition. Could you let me know what the next steps are?
These phrases make it clear that you have a problem, but they also show that you're reasonable and polite.
And companies are much more likely to help you quickly if you sound calm and professional.
All right, now let's talk about something tricky. What if you have a problem with a coworker?
That's a tough one. You don't want to cause drama, but you still need to address the issue. Instead of saying, John is so lazy. Zarenya, I've noticed that John has been missing deadlines and it's affecting the team. Could we find a way to address this? I'm having some challenges working with John on this project. Could we discuss how to make things smoother? I wanted to bring up a concern about workload distribution. Could we talk about a better way to manage this?
These phrases focus on solutions instead of blaming someone.
Exactly. If you sound professional instead of emotional, people are more likely to take you seriously.
All right, let's recap. When making a complaint, remember these 4 golden rules. Start with a polite phrase. Excuse me, but I think there's a small problem. Use soft, neutral language. I don't mean to be difficult, but focus on solutions, not just the problem. Could you help me with this? End on a positive note. I really appreciate your help.
That's right. And now that we've learned how to complain politely, let's move on to our language and cultural expansion segment.
In English-speaking countries, staying polite and professional is key when dealing with difficult situations.
That's right. In American culture, people expect direct but polite communication. If you have a problem in a store, you can calmly explain the issue and they will try to fix it.
But in British culture, people use a lot of indirect language. Instead of saying, I don't like this, they might say, I'm not sure this is exactly what I expected.
And in some Asian cultures, people avoid open conflict. Instead of complaining directly, they might just say, is there another option available?
So when speaking English, try to adjust your tone and language depending on the cultural context.
All right, here's your challenge for today. Step 1, practice disagreeing politely. Pick a topic and try saying, I see your point, but I think differently. Step 2, imagine a misunderstanding and practice clarifying what you meant. Step 3, try using one polite complaint phrase in a real conversation.
And in the comments, tell us, have you ever had a difficult conversation in English? How did you handle it?
Tomorrow we'll talk about how to improve your writing skills for better fluency. Don't miss it.
See you tomorrow. And until then, keep talking, keep practicing, and enjoy learning English.
Bye for now.